Mark Rogers TV back with you as we continue to knock out schedule by schedule across the Power 5 conferences in college football heading into 2014. We're right in the middle of the ACC. We've knocked out Virginia Tech and Miami. Now we go to Georgia Tech. And I tell you, you look at the ACC, and is there any doubt Florida State's high above everyone else? Clemson, minus all the playmakers they lost going to the NFL, have separated down a notch to number 2. They were kind of 1A or 1B. I know that they got blown out by Florida State, but won a BCS bowl game and played rather well last season. So Clemson drops into that number 2 spot, and then there's probably a gap after Clemson. And then, wow, put a blanket over Georgia Tech, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, possibly Pitt, Duke, who won the division surprisingly last year, almost upset Texas A&M in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And a number of other teams possibly, maybe a Boston College. I think they had a bit of an aberration coming back. I think Adazio is doing good things there at BC, but I would expect them to possibly take a step back after they lose Andre Williams and Chase Reddick. So back to Georgia Tech. We're talking the Yellow Jackets schedule here, and I bring that up because I look at the first 4 scheduled games in the ACC and I see toss-ups. So Georgia Tech starts out with Wofford and Tulane. They catch a break from me because, of course, they always play Georgia, and that's always a very difficult game against typically a top 10 or 15 team in the country. So they automatically play that ACC-SEC rivalry matchup on the last day of the season. This time it's at home in Atlanta. So the rest of the non-conference is a pushover collectively, and I mean a pushover. Wofford, Tulane, who came back in the Green Wave, credit them, had a nice season getting back to a bowl game for the first time since 2002. But it's Wofford, it's Tulane, it's Georgia Southern. For family weekend, let's beat up on Georgia Southern, unless maybe they look at that Florida game tape from last year. Wofford, Tulane, and Georgia Southern. You would expect the Jackets to be at 3-0. Then they play the next 4 against very comparable ACC teams. Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. Miami at home, Duke at home at North Carolina. If we separate these teams at all, I would guess North Carolina is probably the best of the 4. Virginia Tech, Georgia Tech, I think, are extremely close. Can't throw out Duke, though, after winning the division championship last year, and Miami. And Duke has a lot of playmakers back on offense, including Jamison Crowder. Wow. Got to go 3-1 there, Georgia Tech. If you want to win your division championship, I don't think you can go 2-2. Then they should win the next 3 games. They should. I'm not saying they will because, again, even the lower tier of the ACC is capable of beating everybody except Florida State, most likely Clemson. Georgia Tech then goes to Pitt, plays Virginia, plays North Carolina State. Those are 3 wins. They should be 3 wins. Pitt, Virginia, and North Carolina State, end of October, beginning of November. Then they've got Clemson. So we talked about this in the Virginia Tech and Miami videos. You play everybody in your division. You play the 2 non-division games, and it's crucial who you play. If you're Virginia Tech, you don't have to face Florida State, Louisville, or Clemson. And we forgot about talking about Louisville. They're probably in that Clemson tier, possibly maybe a rung beneath. But no Florida State and Louisville for Georgia Tech, but the Jackets do have to play Clemson at home. That's probably a game I'm going to give them, and I'm looking in November, and it's the first day of August, all the way to November, but I think the Tigers better than the Jackets right now. But that's a winnable game for Georgia Tech at home before they conclude with the Georgia Bulldogs on the road at Sanford Stadium. So Georgia Tech, again, they play Pitt and they play Clemson in the other division. That's fair. They play the one toughie against the second best team in the ACC, and then Pitt's probably the, 10th best team in the conference? Something in that range. So Georgia Tech, again, most likely they go 3-1 non-conference because I expect Georgia's going to be serious this year. Especially they get it together with Hudson Mason at quarterback and really build the momentum and find the cohesion on offense throughout the season. That's going to be difficult for Georgia Tech to win at Sanford Stadium to close out the season. So most likely 3-1 non-conference. They got to win those 3 non-conference games. Then I think this team could go anywhere. They could go anywhere. They could go 7-1 in the ACC. They could go 3-5 in the ACC. Most likely, I think we're looking at 4-4 or 5-3. So what is this? This is about an 8-win football team potentially. Georgia Tech possibly at 8-4. Again, no Florida State, no Louisville. The tough non-conference game at Georgia to conclude the season. Wofford, Tulane, Georgia Southern gives them off to a good start before they dive into the ACC with 4 games that are just, man, clump those teams together. Virginia Tech, Miami, Duke, North Carolina. If you got some thoughts about that, how we can possibly separate those other ACC teams, let us know. I think if there's one to separate besides Florida State, Clemson, and to a lesser extent Louisville, I think that team is North Carolina. Let me know, ACC fans, Georgia Tech fans, do you have a shot to win the division? Get back to the ACC championship game after a couple years removed. Let's talk about it right here on Mark Rogers TV.